Hello and welcome to the Stew with JT Brew. I'm your host, Justin Taylor. Tonight, we have a special fantasy hockey edition of the Stew. We're pumped to be brought to you by our friends over at Fantrax. Thanks for helping us share the love of fantasy hockey. Get ready. The Stew begins now.
You up on trades and why you move? You ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release. We started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of the leaderboard. Quite obviously not a scrub, so start an institute. Make evaluations like a commissioner do. It's to the point your wife make you watch in a different room. Update your roster and pick and choose when you get some news. Not much that we enjoy more than sipping brew, sifting through new statistics to make it to our end zones through different routes. Universities, institutes, down to homies who click in groups. I introduce you to the Stew with JT Brew.
Thanks for joining us on this special edition of the Stew with JT Brew. I'm JT. Welcome in my good friend and co-host, Bryan Clark, better known as Toast to all his friends. This is our inaugural fantasy hockey podcast. Pumped to have you on, man.
Yeah, JT, thanks a lot for having me on. We've been talking about this for a long time, and thank God it is hockey season.
That's right, getting started. So we're going to get into our Toast takes. Remember, hockey season is right around the corner. If you're getting your league reactivated or you're looking at starting a new league, we're kind of going to break down some of those things for you, some settings we liked, some other things we want to do as far as fantasy hockey, whether you're brand new, whether you're a seasoned vet. We're just going to go over a little bit of everything. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is decide what platform you're going to play on. If you're starting a new league or do something new, or maybe you want to move your league, maybe you've been on a platform for a while, you look for something different. There's all kinds of sites out there. ESPN, Yahoo, NHL.com are some of the main ones that have been around forever. We have really got excited about Fantrax here lately. We have moved all our leagues over to Fantrax. Tell me some of the things you really like about Fantrax.
Yeah, so JT, we've been running our ESPN site for our home league for close to a decade now, and you're very limited on what you can actually do on certain platforms. Fantrax, the greatest thing about Fantrax is I would say their draft room, I say, is like quote unquote state of the art. So they have it's modern. It's got a lot of color coordinating for different positions. It's easily navigatable, so you can really get around pretty well. But I love the fact that it accommodates about anything you want. So certain scoring formatting. I mean, they got so many scoring options, you wouldn't believe it. With other formats, you're pretty limited. So it just gives you a lot of options. We should have done it 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I'm pumped about the changes we've made, and we're going to talk about some of that in this episode. Some changes we made personally in our own league, just to make the league better, to make the scoring more even. We're going to kind of go through all that stuff as we get along. So, first thing we want to talk about: what are some fantasy hockey league settings that you personally like? What are some of the things that, if people are looking at, what are some of the basics, and what are some adjustments you like to make as you go through?
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head there. Adjustments. We've made a bunch of adjustments over the years in our home league, as a lot of other people actually do in their leagues as well. So you finally find that good mix, a good recipe that actually works for your league. And so again, I'm not buying or selling. This is just kind of what works for us, and it's actually what worked for me. So I love to work in a league where you don't really have positions. Those forwards are forwards. You don't really have to worry about center, left wing, right wing. That helps keep people engaged within their fantasy league, getting on the waiver wire, free agency, whatever it may be, because without that, you're limited on how many players you can actually look. If you're just looking for a forward, you can get a forward. So it really helps that league engagement.
Talk about for briefly. We're in some dynasty leagues where we do have set centers, set right wing, set left wing. So I think as you get a little more advanced in your league, maybe some of those dynasty settings, you get a little bit bigger leagues with more teams, more players. I don't mind the specific positions, but in a redraft regular league, I'm 100% with you. I like where you're just making it forward, you're just making defensemen. It just makes it a lot easier for the casual player, shall we say, to kind of get in there and play your best lineup without having to go, well, I've got 5 great left wings and I've got one kind of crappy right wing. And now what am I going to do with this guy? I got to play this guy every week. So I definitely think there's a distinction there.
Yeah, and I think that fantasy hockey's on the up. I mean, of course, I don't think it'll ever, supplant fantasy football as number one. But so you would imagine you're going to get the majority of casual fans that actually play this format and play fantasy hockey. So you want to keep it as simple as possible, especially for people that are new. So that's the whole concept of actually using forward versus using what you have positions anyway.
Yeah, kind of break down some of these other things.
A couple other
bangers league, defensemen, goalies. Kind of talk about some of that.
Yeah, so Bangers League. Let me explain what a Bangers League is. Bangers is really a league that actually puts great value on hits, blocks, PIMs. All right, so why do people actually run Bangers Leagues? They run them so they can actually get value on mainly defensemen. You really want to put a place of value on defensemen because there's only really a handful of defensemen in the entire league that are power play quarterbacks, and we'll talk about that here in a bit, that really score a ton of points. They score 60, 70 points a year. The majority of defensemen are stay-at-home defensemen. They actually do what they're supposed to do. They play defense. They're not offensive. But you want, again, we talk about league engagement. You want that engagement where you actually can have people look in the waiver wire, the free agency wire, and actually have options to keep them engaged, to actually make all their moves per week. So Banger leagues are great for that. They really boost up the value of those defensemen. And
talk about goalies. Like good things about goalie leagues. Leagues without, we're in both. We're in leagues that have goalies. We're in leagues that we eliminated goalies altogether. Kind of talk about the positive and negatives having goalies in your league.
Yeah, so let's just say that everybody has a love-hate relationship with goalies. There's no doubt about that. The goalie is pretty much, let's say, your equivalent of RB2 when it actually comes to fantasy football. They could get hurt at any moment. You're going to be a rotating position in and out. Goalies are unreliable. So if you are going to have goalies in your league and you're going to, let's say you're a league manager, you're going to set up a new league, I would highly recommend making sure your goalies don't score negative points. Make them have some points. Make them some value. Again, so that way they can go ahead and, again, we talk about engagement. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again, league engagement. You don't want to make positions for the scoring format in a way where people don't even want to field that position. Why even have it then? So you need to make them valuable. So really limit the amount for like an overtime loss. Really limit about maybe save percentage, but really emphasize wins, if you will. So the majority of the time in the leagues I play in, either we don't have a goalie or the goalie if we do actually have goalies, we make sure that they have some type of value.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about some of the scoring changes we've made in our league that we've had for over a decade, where we just really noticed that it was either you took a goalie who was on a team that won a lot, or people would just sit goalies or not even play anyone because they would score negative points whenever they got a loss. We made some adjustments in the scoring system in order to make all goalies more important and to make those guys that got a lot of saves, even if their team is terrible, if they're facing a million shots a game, we made some adjustments to make those guys worthwhile, to make it look like, hey, this guy's had 45 saves, but he took the loss. He shouldn't score negative points.
Yeah, and we'll talk about those type of players maybe later on. But, Thatcher Demko for Vancouver, perfect example. Vancouver was a dumpster fire last year. But this guy is perennial, like a 915 save percentage and above, which is really, really good for any, fantasy format and really good in real life. So should he really be penalized for actually having pretty good games, but you end up getting a goalie loss? So you just got to make sure you work with your league manager to make sure the settings really are conducive to actually value a position. If not, get rid of that position.
I love it. Talk about a little bit. Waiver moves are a thing we've talked about over the years. How many is good amount for a week? Are we counting games? Is it like, hey, do we have guys in our league that everyone's really trying to maximize the amount of plays? Do we have some more casual guys in our league that just don't have the time to get in front of the computer and figure that stuff out? Let's kind of talk about benefits of having a lot of waiver moves versus also the benefits of minimizing the amount of waiver moves each week.
Yeah, so the majority of leagues have a waiver where you can make a waiver moves where you can actually make up to, let's say, a move a day. So majority leagues have 7, right? And that's the max. Some actually have maybe 1 or 2, whatever. You need to find that happy medium. Here's the reason why: is the majority of fantasy hockey players, again, they're in multiple leagues. They may even be in football leagues that are going on at the same time. They may not have the time to end up making 7 moves a week. And I will tell you, especially with our home league, and you know this better than anybody, JT, the majority of the time, whomever ends up making the most moves throughout the week usually ends up having the best records at the end of the season. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So why penalize somebody just because they're not having the time to actually get in there and hawk a guy off the waiver wire or make sure they're actually streaming that goalie the way they want to? So you need to find that happy medium. So a recommendation would be is find somewhere in the middle, maybe 4 moves a week, right? So that way it's not overwhelming for people. You again, you'll find that engagement. You don't want leagues dominated by 3 or 4 guys, players, managers, that is, and then end up having another 5 or 6 guys saying, I just don't have the time to put into it. Because here's what's going to happen. You're going to find yourself without a league at that point. So you want to make sure it's actually conducive to everybody and make sure that it fits everybody's needs.
Yeah, another thing we've talked about over the years, you'll have your straight redraft league, but a lot of teams, if you start a brand new league, you start from scratch. But one of the things that kind of keep people engaged and create a little bit of trading in your league is to add keepers into your league. And a lot of leagues will just do the keepers at the highest end, whoever the top 3 players you have as a keeper. Something that we do in our league that I found really creates a lot of movement and really keeps the league involved is we get to keep 3 guys, and we keep 3 guys and you get them in the round you drafted them in, and then they move up after that 2 rounds per year. And then you start seeing value trades. You start seeing guys going, hey, instead of just keeping the 3 best players, if a guy's a first or second rounder, people throw them back. So you can go back and redraft those top end players. But what you're really doing is you're rewarding guys for drafting really well, taking some young guys, maybe holding on to them when they're not scoring points, and then getting that guy in the 18th round that now becomes a superstar in a year or 2, and now you're keeping them for a while. Talk a little bit about, different strategies and things you like about keepers in different rounds and the round you draft them in.
Yeah, so having draft tags on players is awesome. And we'll put another plug into Fantrax. They help out with that need so much. So you're able to go to the draft board and go to the certain draft spot and insert that player based on where they're kept. No other format you can do that I'm aware of. All right, so that helps out an absolute ton.
That has been huge. That has been huge for our league.
Yeah, because if not, I got to do all that on paper. I got to keep a draft board. We got to actually write it down by hand and then get kind of creative with it. Fantrax actually allows that to where you can slot anybody on a draft board wherever you want to. And I will say too, pretty pumped about that because I got Tim Stützle in the 20th round. So next year, if I keep him, he'd be an 18th rounder and 16th. So I got my guy for probably the next 6 or 7 years. And his ceiling's pretty high. So I love that slide format. But you kind of hit it on the head. The majority of the time, keeper formats are, we'll just eliminate the first couple rounds and then go from there. This is great because
I was going to say the biggest problem for us has been, a decade ago, we could get everybody together for a live draft. So we do it all by hand on a big board, on a dry erase board, and we could slot those guys in. So hard. The older you get, more people have kids, guys move away. They want to stay in the league, but they got to do online drafting. And a lot of formats, all it is you get the first 3 picks. So the first 3 rounds are just gone. That's what it is with keepers. And having the ability to actually still do an online draft where you can slot those guys in, where you don't have an oops, like just don't draft that guy and then oops, somebody forgets and takes him, and it gets rid of that. To me, it's a game changer for keeper leagues, and especially now that almost everything is moving to online drafts.
Yeah, you're talking about the shot girl, JT. So yeah, usually when somebody ends up drafting somebody that's already been drafted, bring the shots on. So people that end up buying shots on a regular basis every single year, you don't have to worry about that anymore if we're on the Fantrax platform.
Yeah, what's a couple other scoring things you like to see? Is like shorthanded goals, odds and ends. What's some things you like to kind of over the normal? What do you like to kind of boost the point wise just a little bit to kind of even things out across the board?
Yeah, so imagine you're actually watching a hockey game on TV. We want to reward points. Again, say we, meaning the majority of leagues, if you're setting up a league, you should actually want to reward points for things you can see and notice on the television. All right. So face-off wins, not a big deal. All right. That's my opinion. Not a big deal. Somebody won a face-off. You don't even recognize it. All right. A giveaway or a takeaway. You don't really recognize that. Now a hit, I recognize that because guess what? That gets people out of their seats. A shorthanded goal, they're rare. All right. So if they're rare, we should actually reward them. So I know we do in our league. If you get a shorthanded goal, that's 3 points on top of the goal. So you're getting a 6 to 7 point scoring with a shot on goal, which is 0.2 as well. It's a big deal because, again, it doesn't happen that often. So think about rewarding your league and actually scoring your league based on if you were watching a television and what could you see and what you can't see. And again, what you can't see, meaning what you don't remember. All right. So if it ends up being where you don't remember, don't score it. If you're going to remember it and you can actually remember what happened, score those. All right. So that would end up keeping a casual fan engaged.
Yeah, or like, if you are going to reward face-off, say that's something you want to do, make that a minor scoring thing where you're just giving like, 0.1 or something for a face-off one, little things like that if you want to do. My biggest thing, and one of the things me and you have talked about over the years, is how do you get more people engaged in fantasy hockey? Points. When we're back in the day when you do fantasy hockey, if guys scored 3 or 4 points, it was a ton. And you had a ton of weeks where guys or days or nights or whatever, where guys would score 0 for you and half your team would score 0. Can't have that. To keep people engaged the way basketball and football football fantasy works, people want to see points scored. So figure out a way to, really boost up those goals. Shorthanded goals, like you said, something we've made a big emphasis on in our league is shots on goal, because a lot of leagues used to not count that. Hey, guys putting the puck on the goal is a big deal. So raise those points up, make it to where your guys are scoring a decent amount of points. It doesn't have to be absurd, but a hat trick needs to be a monster game. I mean, it needs to be a huge bonus. Those types of things is kind of what we've talked about that kind of make fantasy hockey better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Next thing, we'll move on. What kind of advice can you give to those new fantasy hockey players considering positional drafting, kind of where to go from there?
Yeah, so again, it all comes down to format on how your league is set up. If it ends up being where your league counts positional drafting, meaning center, left wing, right wing, defenseman, and goalie, I would really place an emphasis on players that have dual eligibility. All right, so center, left wings, or left wing, right wing, or there's a couple players in the league that have center, left wing, and right wing. They're pretty few, but nevertheless, that gives you all kinds of flexibility with your lineup. All right, what I will say is right wings are thin. They just are. Every single year, you have your players like Vinny Trocheck. You got Patrick Kane. You got Nikita Kucherov. But honestly, 5 or 6 guys I can mention, it drops off drastically. Not like left wing. Left wing, you got a million of them. Centers are great, and I'll tell you why, JT. So if it ends up being where you have a center, you're new to fantasy, and you end up coming in the draft. I had a conversation with another guy like this other day, a new guy that's coming into our league. He's like, how should I end up drafting if I have no idea? Draft centers. They're your quarterback. They touch the puck more than anybody. They drive play. They're good for goals. They're good for assists, power play points, whatever it may be that your league actually emphasizes. But centers touch the puck. Okay. Wings are reliant on centers to some degree. So that's that common sense I like to put into any type of league. Like if you're like, I don't really know what to do, draft a center. Now I will say in our format, it's easy because they're just forwards. So I would say, hey, centers are pretty valuable. You can only end up having so many centers on a format that really has positional drafting. All right. So just be in mind, if you take away anything from this, centers are good. They touch the puck. They're going to get goals and assists. Right wings are pretty thin. All right. So that's what I would talk about, positional scarcity, if you will.
Yeah, give some advice. What advice would you give to new fantasy hockey players when they're targeting players for their upcoming draft? Like,
Yeah.
on
So
top of just the center, those things. We kind of who are some guys? What are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'll just tell you what I did. And I was a hockey fan for a long time. Back in the '90s, always been a big Blackhawks fan, obviously. But back in the '90s, in '92, actually playing the Pens in the conference finals, getting swept. Never forget that. Ended up being where I didn't watch the Hawks for a while in the mid 2000s. Reason being because they took them off television, which was ended up being the worst thing that ever happened. Come back in 2007, 2008, because that's when Taves and Kane got drafted, ended up becoming a big hockey fan and then watch all of hockey. All right. So, and saying that when I got into fantasy hockey probably about a decade ago, I really didn't know a lot of players around the league. I knew the Blackhawks. All right. And I knew some of the teams they actually played, but I didn't really know the players. So I went to the drawing board and figured out, again, apply common sense. What's the top 10 to 12 scoring teams every year if you look at goals scored? And then look at their top lines, at their top power play lines, their PP1s. Who's playing on those? Draft those guys, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the majority of teams that are actually scoring in the top 10 to 12 overall, the majority of teams, not all, the majority may end up having about 3 fringe star players or even star players, right? You're not going to go wrong if you draft one of those guys. They score in bunches. So, I can mention a bunch of them, whatever you let me know if you want to, but that would be my recommendation is go through, figure out your top 10 in scoring from last year and maybe the year before, add them all together, and figure out who's on their top line and draft those players.
Yeah, a lot of times the way with everything being online these days, once you go in and you put your league scoring in, you can literally go through and it'll give you a nice little estimate of where you think guys are going to score that year, kind of based on your breakdown. I always tell people to go in that. If I'm in a league that's been, you know, already running for a couple years, one of the big things I like to do is I like to go back and look at last season's scoring, hit up top performers, and kind of see what guys put up points, who's on the same team, who moved teams, who's in a better situation. And I maybe want to move those guys or adjust them up or down my rankings, depending on, do I think their situation's better? Do I think their situation's worse? Did they get traded to a better team, but now they're on second line as opposed to on the first line? That type of thing, like you said, finding those teams that are good. That was my strategy early on in hockey. Like when I got into fantasy hockey, I'd obviously take my favorite. I'm a Red Wings guy. We have one of our teams together called House Divided because you're a Blackhawks guy. I'm a Red Wings guy. Us both being from Illinois, but my mom's family's all from Detroit, and I grew up Red Wings fans. So we used to draft a lot of hockey, like a lot of Blackhawks, a lot of Red Wings players. But then I thought, who's good? Is Toronto good? Is Boston good? Is Colorado good? I want the guys on the good team. Like you said, those teams that are winning are going to put up points. So those are the teams I want to look to first. I want to get those guys. If I'm in doubt between a guy on a good team and a bad team, I'm probably going to take the guy on the good team because I just assume he's going to have more opportunities to score.
Yeah, the common sense approach, right? So take Toronto, for example. You got Austin Matthews. He scores 50 to 60 goals every year. William Nylander and John Tavares. They all play together. They're on power play one. I'll just put them as one example. If you look at their team scoring, goals scored per team, they're in the top 5 every season. That's been that way for at least the last 3 or 4 years. Why wouldn't you actually do that, right? So now, as you get more acclimated and more in depth and invested within fantasy hockey, you're going to start looking at those bottom feeders and be able to pick out those diamonds in the rough. right? So you'll have guys like that. But again, for the casual fan, for the person actually maybe just first getting started, target those teams. I mean, you really can't go wrong. It's not rocket science at all.
Another thing, when you're kind of looking outside those, top 5, 10 scores that everybody knows that those guys are really putting up points, what is the main stat you go to look at when you look up guys to figure out who do I think has an opportunity to either exceed expectations or exceed what they scored last year? What is the one you go and look at and say, this is the stat I want to look up and go, this guy has a shot to have a breakout year?
Yeah, great question. Shots on goal. So you can't score without actually shooting a puck. So there is consistently, you mentioned like Brady Tkachuk, Timo Meyer, Alex Ovechkin, William Nylander, Pasta. Those guys, every single year, they're over 300 shots on goal. If you shoot, you're going to score. Now, the majority of players, they probably average between 15 to 17 or 18% shooting, meaning for every 100 shots they put on goal, they're scoring 15 to 17 to 18 goals. All right. So you might end up looking at players the previous year and say, you know what? Every single year he's runs 16, 15, 16%. The last year he's at 23. All right. So that may end up being is that sustainable? Maybe not. Right. So you really want to draft accordingly where you're drafting the 16 to 17% shooter and just assuming, again, that the 23 to 24% is just not going to be replicated because that's very, very difficult. Unless you actually play on Edmonton, unless you're actually McDavid, unless you're Draisaitl. That's different, right? Those guys are just different. I would say take the rule book and all the stats and throw them out the window with those guys. It doesn't matter. It makes no difference.
Yeah, you mentioned a bangers league earlier. We're in a few leagues that are mostly high score, but we're in a couple leagues, banger leagues. Our main home league is a bangers league. Kind of talk about that format, Matt, where you're kind of looking to draft guys, defensemen you like, some of those guys that kind of shoot up the board in a bangers league that maybe are guys you kind of ignore in a regular fantasy format.
Yeah, so we talk about defensemen. Again, the majority, they're called defensemen for a reason, meaning the majority of defensemen are stay-at-home defensemen. They play defense. They don't actually think about offense. So how can they actually score? And you talk about that banger league format that we love, right? Because we can actually make that free agent pool so much greater, extending the value of that free agent pool. Again, breeding that activity within the league actually for pickups. You got guys like Rocco Gudis. You got Luke Shin, Adam Larson, Jacob Trouba, Mort Seider. Those guys are going to get you anywhere from 250 hits a year to about 125 blocks a year combined. And some of them may end up scoring you like 7 or 8 goals, another 20 assists. I mean, so if you look at it at the end of the year, they may end up being in the top 75 and scoring in your banger league format, but yet you can get them in the 18th, 19th, 20th round, or heck, they may even go undrafted, right? So we may talk about this here in a bit, JT, about draft strategy, right? But depending on your league format, and again, I'll talk about bangers leagues. It's because we love them. Is you might be able to wait on defensemen, right? Because the Cale Makars and the Adam Foxes of the world, they may end up scoring similar points to the Luke Shins because those guys play like forwards. Makar and Roman Yossi, Yossi maybe not, but Makar, they play like forwards, but they're defensemen. And basically, these other guys hit and block so much, they're making up for it. And you can almost even out the scoring, so to speak. So think about that. Again, a reminder, look at your league format scoring. You really got to actually look at that. I just was in a dynasty draft that lasted a month. Just got done. It was through Dauber, which awesome website. I recommend everybody go to dauberhockey.com. It's great. But in that format, I didn't draft a defenseman until the 11th round. And all I ended up doing was getting defensemen that hit and block. And I guarantee by the end of the year, I'm going to be just fine because I loaded up on guys who can actually put the puck in the net.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk about some defensemen who are not just bangers. Some of those guys that if you are going to go a little bit early, you're not going to wait on just the banger guys. What are some of those guys you're looking for? What are the the characteristics of those defensemen that you want to, if you're going to go, hey, I want to try to get one of the top 5 guys or top 6 guys, I want to have an advantage on defense. Who are some of the guys I'm looking at?
Yeah, so they're called power play quarterbacks, JT. And these are guys that, again, they play some defense, but their main job, the way they're hired for their team, and they're on their team to really drive scoring. That's their job. All right. So Kale McCarr for Colorado. Roman Yossi's been doing it for years. What makes Yossi so great is the fact that he also hits and he shoots like a forward. All right. He'll have 280 to 300 shots on goal every season. You got the tandem over in Tampa Bay. You got Josh Morrissey. You got Victor Hedman. You got Dougie Hamilton. Rasmus Dahlin, one of the guys, I'm like, all right, you need to keep him in our home league, man, because here's a guy that ends up putting 175 hits, 125 blocks. He's going to score you 65 points. That's scoring like a forward. All right. I mean, how do you can't replicate that. So, but here's like everybody's probably asking right now, why don't you just go draft those guys? There's only a handful of them. You probably have 8 or 9 guys throughout the league that you can count on every single year that are going to do that. After you end up moving on from those guys in a draft, which is probably end up being around 4, 5, 6, you might as well wait at that point. Wait for your bangers. Wait for guys that are actually going to fill up all the peripherals, because you just don't have them. So those guys are a dime a dozen.
Yeah, most leagues, new leagues or redraft leagues, have goalies. So, we talked about some leagues we've just eliminated goalie altogether because it's kind of crazy, what happens and what doesn't happen in a lot of our dynasty leagues. But most of our redraft leagues, we still have goalies in, and in our keeper leagues, we have goalies. So what are some of the best draft strategies when you go in and you're looking at goalies, who to take, when to kind of take them? Give me a little heads up on kind of what you think about goalies.
Yeah, I think I said it before. Goalies are volatile. So you can't count on them. It's an injury-prone position, if you will. Now, unless you're like Andre Vasilevsky, right, for Tampa Bay. Every single year he's there. He's going to end up getting the crease probably 60 starts a year, 65 starts a year. The backup's going to get like 17 to 20. But there's very few guys like that. So what you need to do if you're going to go into a draft is really try to look at goalies and tier them. All right. This would be no different. You're in a football draft, actually tiering any other position, right? So you may tier and second, third, fourth tier, fifth tier. You may end up having 7 tiers before it's all said and done. I'm going to challenge everybody's to end up being where, hey, like, I don't really trust goalies. Look at your 3rd tier, your 4th tier. Your guys like, again, Demko for Vancouver. Guy's a good goalie. All right. They went out and got a lot of defense on that team this year. They didn't have a whole lot of help last year. Jacob Markstrom plays for Calgary. He ended up having a big contract, came from Vancouver, but he had an off year last year. Again, they've tried to make some improvements. He's not going to be as bad as he was last year. This is a good goalie. He's been proven. So another guy I want to talk about, you got Skinner for Edmonton. They're going to score a ton of points. Reason being for Skinner, they're going to win close to 50 games. But he's not that good of a goalie. But look at who he has in front of him as the forwards. All right. So you have to kind of tier those goalies and actually say, am I fine just letting the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th tiers go on and then start drafting goalies and get 2 of them in the 5th tier? I would do that. They're no different than RB2 in football, where they can't be trusted. They cannot be trusted. They're going to get banged up at one point or another. So you can always end up picking up a good goalie on the waiver wire. Another thing I'll say is during the draft, that kind of breeds into that 0 goalie approach. So you've all heard it. Again, I'll continue to actually say within fantasy football, because that's what the majority of people actually know. But I'm going 0 RBs. Okay, no different. We're going 0 goalie. Doesn't mean you're not going to draft a goalie. You're just going to wait. You're going to wait forever. All right. So I would say this year you got guys again. Philip Gustafsson for Minnesota. Jonas Corposalo. Darcy Kemper for Washington. The Bob over in Florida. You have guys you can wait on that are proven, and they have good forwards and defense in front of them. They're gonna win a lot of games, and they are not high up on the board. You can wait on goalie if you'd like to.
Yeah, I always make sure the biggest thing when it comes to goalies for me in fantasy hockey is look at your scoring. Look how they're scoring goalies because that makes a huge difference. If you're look at your fantasy scoring and goalies, all their points are coming from wins, you better get a guy on a good team. If it's basically coming down to wins and goals against, get a guy on a good team. Now, if you're in a league like ours, which we've made the adjustments, we give a lot of points for saves. We're saying, hey, if a guy has 40 saves and gets a loss, and another guy has 15 saves and gets the win, it should be more of an equal scoring for us because the guy that had 40 saves played out of his mind. So, but look at that because if you're in a league that does give 0 points towards saves, and then it's literally goals against and wins, then make sure you get at least one goalie on a good team.
Yeah,
I'd say that for sure.
Yeah, JT. Yeah, couldn't agree more. If you got a goalie that ends up saying they save 36 shots on 38 or 36 saves on 38 shots on goal, only give up 2 goals to get the loss, they should be scoring positive points, period.
Yeah.
All right. That's a good game. You're at a 925 to 930 save percentage, maybe even a little bit higher. I actually don't have the calculator in front of me, but you actually have a good defense. Let's say Freddie Anderson, for example. Let's say Carolina only gives up maybe on average 25, 26, 27 shots a game. Their goalie can end up having 23 for 26 or 27, give up 4 shots, get the win all the time because they're so good. But the other goalie outplays them all the time, right? So again, fantasy managers out there that are actually league managers, think about that when you're actually setting up goalie scoring. Don't make them obsolete.
Absolutely.
Because as soon as you end up being obsolete, nobody's going to want to play them. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to ask for you to get rid of them until you actually adjust the scoring.
Yeah, and if you're not a commissioner of a league, bring that up to your commissioner. Go out there and say, hey, let's do something with the scoring system to make these goalies worth more. Let's knock down wins from 5 points for a win, -5 for a loss. Maybe it's, -2 for a loss, 3 or 4 for a win, but then give, a decent amount of points. I can't remember what's our save. What's our save points? Is it
0.2.
0.1 per save? 0.2 per save. Go in there and say, hey, bring that up to your commissioner. Maybe that's something they've never thought about. Say, hey, maybe let's make it 0.2 per save, and let's make wins worth 3 and losses versus -1. And then you got a guy who, instead of him getting 41 saves out of 43 shot attempts and losing 2-1, and he ends up scoring you -5 points, he can actually score you positive. So that's something to think about. That's a big change me and you have really harped on the last couple of years for fantasy hockey, really making that scoring change for goalies where it's not 100% reliant on wins.
Yeah, you do the 0.2. 0.2 doesn't seem like a lot, right? So let's say you have 35 saves, right? Or even 30 saves, you're looking at 1.5 points. But if you think about it, they only give up 3 goals. All right, so 1.5 points there for your saves at that point, and you give up 2 goals, you're already at -5, right? So you really got to be pretty cognizant of exactly, again, making sure they have some positive scoring. And does that happen where some goalies score negative? Yeah, it happens. When they get yanked in the first period after, 7 or 8 minutes, they've actually seen 9 shots, they've given up 5 goals and they get yanked, and it's just one of those deals. You're not going to avoid that. That's fine, and they should get penalized for that. Yeah, just be aware of the goalie scoring. It's, again, if you take anything away from this podcast today, it's a very volatile position.
Yeah. Something I love is we're going to constantly bring up fantasy football, like you said, because me and you play a ton of fantasy football leagues. We're commissioners of fantasy football leagues. We like to compare it to hockey because we think the more you can compare it, the more you bring people over to hockey. Stacking in fantasy football. I'm a huge fan of the stack. I love the stack, QB wide receiver stack, QB tight end stack. Now, I've heard a lot of people in hockey, they're like, I don't want 2 guys on the same team. Like, oh, I don't know. It's like, they both can't score. What is the advantage of stacking players in hockey? And kind of look at what are some of the misconceptions about having guys on the same team in hockey?
Yeah, it's a long season. So hockey will be a lot longer of a season than fantasy football. Fantasy football on average usually like 12, 13, 14 weeks. usually 13. In hockey, you're usually looking at somewhere between 19, 20, 21 weeks. So I'd say you may end up having those weeks where you have players on the same team and they may not be playing, but maybe, let's say 2 days a week or whatever. But overall, for the entire season, that's going to pay off. And again, you target those teams that put the puck in the net consistently every single year. So we're talking about what are the best stacks in the league, right? So, well, McDavid, right? But let's talk about realistic stacks. You're not going to get McDavid and Draisaitl on the same team. It's not going to happen, right? But you can get McDavid and Hyman. You could end up getting McDavid and Bouchard, who's their power play quarterback at defense. You get Thompson and Skinner. Guys were writing off Skinner at Buffalo like 2 years ago. He was practically dead. And main reason that's because of his $9 million contract, right? But he can still score. And they normally actually want Tage Thompson and they want Tuck, or they want Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins, but you can get Skinner cheap. Try to stack those type of guys. I'm gonna go down. I got a couple I want to talk about. All right. So Robertson and Hentz over at Dallas, man, those guys are awesome. They with them and Pavelski on that first line and the top power play, they're gold. They're absolute gold. That's a hard stack to get. All right. But I'll tell you a stack that you can actually get this year. And maybe I shouldn't be telling you this, JT, but you got Matthew Tkachuk on your team. All right. You got Matthew Tkachuk on your team in the home league. Barkov, the center, he's fallen. He's going 60 to 70 overall. And I don't know why. Main reason why is because his shooting percentage was actually down. But again, I'll stress, Barkov's a center. He touches the puck. He's going to actually get points. And if you look at Barkov over his many years in the league, he's not going to end up shooting the percentage he was shooting at last year. All right. He's going to be 3 or 4 percentages above that, which is going to take his goals from, I think he ended up having somewhere in the low 30s, and he's going to be the high 30s next year. That's a great stack. Great stack. Jack Hughes, your guy, another one you actually have in our league. Jesper Bratt's on the rise. He's 25 years old. He's now actually being pretty much given the keys and saying, hey, you know what? You are also going to be on that first power play with Jack Hughes. He really had his comp party last year. That's a great stack. I'll mention a couple others without actually going into depth, but Crosby, Gensel, and Pittsburgh. Of course, Kucherov and Point and Tampa Bay. You could get Kucherov and Stamkos as well if you went first and second round. Matthews, Nylander, that's your first round with Matthews and your third round with Nylander. And then Pettersson and Kuzmenko over in Vancouver. And that's an interesting one. They were a dumpster fire last year. Vancouver will be better this year. There's no way. They got way too much firepower in that team, way too much offense. And again, they got Thatcher Demko to keep them in games. He's not a bad goalie. But Pettersson is a guy you can probably get in the second to maybe the early third, probably the second. And Kuzmenko, I mean, there's a guy in our league actually keeping Kuzmenko in the 20th round. But he's probably a guy that's going to go 8th. 9th round. He scored 39 goals as a 27-year-old guy from Russia last year. So there are stacks that you can actually use to your advantage. Now, you get the playoffs. Again, you can't be in love with these stacks. You got to be ready to pivot, right? So you may end up using a lot of these guys until the end of the season or to the trade deadline, and you may end up getting rid of one of them because, again, you're going to make the push for the long run. You want to get that schedule advantage, right, when we end up coming to the playoffs. So those are some of the stacks I like, and I'm really, really big into stacking players.
Yeah, I think that's some great because stacking in hockey is a little bit different than it is in football. So I think those are some great stacks and some great ideas. I love the Barkov idea. Now I'm going to have to be waiting to see if I can get him in our league. You gave me a great thought. There's no way he gets to me. He's going to get taken before I get him. Let's talk about some value picks. There are a few guys out there you feel are kind of sneaky value heading in this year. Some guys that, like, maybe you would take a little bit higher than their rank so people can kind of write them down, put them on their list as far as when they're going into their drafts.
Yeah, so Carter Verhaeghe for Florida. He is, I'd say, third fiddle, right, in Florida behind Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk. But most managers, two guys. Verhaeghe's a young guy. I think he scored 39 or 40 goals. He's real young. He's only going to get better. They are going to lean on him a lot more this year. He's got great value. You can get him probably beyond pick 50, right? So Pick 50. Think about that. 50 players ahead of him. He's going to score 40 goals. This is a scoring league now. Travis Konechny over in Philadelphia, they don't have anybody else, right? I mean, Philadelphia is actually rebuilding. They got Torts as their coach. Everybody hates him. But nevertheless, he must like Konechny because he ended up getting a lot of time on ice last year. And Konechny ended up having his best season. He's young. I don't know how old he is. I want to say he's 23, 24, 25 years old, but never. Konechny's another guy. You can probably get it pick 75. Nico Hischier is a guy that everybody should be targeting in their drafts. He is going to be the center, the second center in New Jersey, but he'll be top power play. He'll move over to the wing on the top power play to make room for Jack Hughes. But again, you got Timo Meier, you got Jack Hughes. Hischier's that third fiddle guy. I mean, again, I target a lot of those players in draft thinking, all right, I'm not going to reach for the top two guys. I'm going to get the third guy, and the third guy can probably almost score as many goals as them. All right. And goals are worth 4 in most formats, or 4.5, whatever. But he also gets assists as well. Again, center. He's a center. They drive play. I mentioned a couple more guys I really, really like as format. You got Bo Horvat. He is the center for the Islanders. Actually moved over from Vancouver last year. They don't have anybody else. All right. The Islanders, they traditionally don't score. Somebody's got to score for that team. And Horvat he's proven at Vancouver, he can do it. So a couple other guys I won't go into detail about, but you got Zach Hyman. Again, we mentioned for Edmonton. He's playing McDavid. Should I say any more? Right? That's all you need to know. He plays with McDavid. He'll be on the same line as McDavid likely, and he will definitely be on power play 1. You got Justin Tuck, who actually ends up playing for Buffalo. You're playing with Tage Thompson. You're playing with Dylan Cousins. You're playing with Jeff Skinner. Tuck is that guy that's kind of forgotten. He'll also get you some hits. He'll get you some blocks, right? So for bangers, he's awesome. Jared McCann for Seattle is a great sneaky pick. And the reason being is everybody thinks Seattle is just this defensive team, and they really are. Think about it. They did almost what Vegas did a couple years ago when they became an expansion team. Seattle, they were great for an expansion team, a second-year team, right? They were awesome. McCann scored almost 40 goals for them last year quietly. So McCann can be had probably beyond 75. You can probably get McCann somewhere in 9th or 10th round if you're actually doing a 10-team format. And then you got guys like Lawson Krause for Arizona. He bangs. He hits quite a bit. He can also put the puck in the back of the net. Nobody even thinks about them because Arizona, most times or not, it's a hot dumpster fire. All right, so nobody's touching them. Brandon Hagel, he literally plays like 4th or 5th fiddle on Tampa Bay. You got Kucherov, you got Stamkos, you got Hedman, you got Sergachev. But then you have Hagel, who happens to get first-line deployment. They just signed into an 8-year contract, over $8 million a season. They believe, or maybe it's 7 or 8, somewhere around there. They believe in the guy. He's going to get deployment. He's going to get power play 1 as well. And I guarantee you, you can wait until the 9th, 10th, 11th round, and he'll get you over 100 hits a year. So think about guys like that. Those are just to name a couple, but there is great value in these drafts at 50 to 100 where you can really, really wait on some players that are actually, again, have great deployment.
Yeah, coming up to the kind of closing out the podcast here, giving us our last couple takes here. Redraft league and a dynasty league where you get to keep guys, or a keeper league, where you get to keep guys in the round you drafted them in. What are some of the young guys, either rookies or guys that people maybe aren't on their radar? Give me some guys that should be on your radar to draft late as a possible keeper, or a guy that if you want to take a shot on in a redraft league might be a guy that hits for you.
Yeah, so I would say that we can't go this podcast without talking about young players. We got to mention Connor Bedard. All right, so
absolutely.
Bedard is, and again, not my words, this is everybody else's words, that he is one of 4 players that have been called a generational talent in the past 25 or 20 years. All right, so you got Crosby, Hall of Famer, one of the best centers who ever played a game, multiple cups. McDavid, probably the best player we've ever seen, right? That has never won a cup. I mean, it's ridiculous what he can do. We call him McJesus. And you got Austin Matthews as well. At Matthew's first game as a pro, he scored 4 goals. All right. I mean, so, and he scored 60 goals. He's been in the league maybe 5-6 years, whatever. Bedard has been mentioned with them as a can't miss. Watched him in the prospect showcase game the other day. His shot angles are ridiculous. He scores. He can put the puck wherever he wants on the net. He has probably one of the best shots already right now, maybe the best shot in the entire NHL, and that's no exaggeration. So don't think you're, especially in keeper leagues, right, and in dynasty leagues, you are not reaching for Connor Bedard. You are actually investing in your future is what you're doing. So Bedard is anyway, I could sit here and talk about Bedard all day. Plus, he's a Hawk, so I'm Jack.
Yeah,
I mean, come on. So
yeah, if he's in a keeper or dynasty league, you got to go out and get him. I mean, he's the kind of guy that's going to be on your roster for a long time. Just how high would you draft Bedard? If you were like, obviously, redraft with no keeper is a different story. But if you're in a keeper league, how high do you think he's going to go? I mean, we haven't seen a ton of data yet because, leagues are just starting out, especially keeper leagues and redraft leagues. Kind of where do you think he's going to go?
Yeah, so it depends on how you value him and how you actually project him, right? So if you project him like Connor McDavid, he goes first round. There's no doubt about that, right? I mean, just use common sense logic there. He's going to go first round because McDavid's putting up 60 goals, 90 assists, 150 points. I mean, it's just, he's a machine. This guy has the ability to potentially do that. And we never say that about anybody. No prospects. And he's not a prospect. He's a prospect, but he'll be on 1C this year for Chicago. And again, Chicago's bad, but by design, they're actually bad. But it will not shock me at all if it ends up being, he'll be a runaway without actually getting injured. He'll be a runaway for the Calder. That's there's no doubt about that. And he'll end up scoring 80 to 90 points this year and maybe more. Because he has that knack for scoring, for setting up his teammates as well. He's awesome. But I would say, if you are doing a redraft league, hey, 4th round, 30th, 40th, 50th overall, somewhere around there. That's probably where, if you're drafting him 10th, 15th overall in a redraft league, you're taking a risk. You are. You never know with a young player. But if it's a dynasty league or a keeper league, I mean, you got to treat him like he's McDavid. You have to.
Who's the 1 or 2 more?
Yeah. So Clayton Keller's forgotten in Arizona. He's only 24 years old. Center's the top line, top power play. I think last year he had somewhere in the neighborhood of close to high 30s in goals, close to 50 assists. I think he had somewhere around 80, 85 points last year. That team was awful. Their ownership's really bad. They're trying to actually get the new arena. They don't really have that leadership they actually need, but yet Keller produced. I mean, think about it. He produced there. He's only 24. I would imagine he's got to get a whole lot better. He does not hit. He does not block a whole lot. But again, you can get him later. Keller will end up probably going 6th, 7th round in 10-team formats. He'll probably go around pick 60 or 70 somewhere. That's great value for a guy like Keller. Who knows? He could go 40. I don't know, but he is a value pick. And the last guy I'd mention here that I really want to talk about, Dylan Cousins. Dylan Cousins, I believe, was the 7th overall pick in the 2019 draft. Last year was his 2nd full year in the league. He had over 30 goals, over 30 assists, and I'm telling you, man, Buffalo is loaded for offense. They have so much talent. You're talking about even Rasmus Dahlin. He's going to end up having 15 goals, probably somewhere around 60 assists, 75 points for a defenseman. And they got Tage Thompson, they got Skinner, they got Tuck. They're young, they're hungry, they're loaded. Goalie is a little bit of an issue or whatnot, but Cousins is a guy where you can get past pick 100. And past pick 100 for a guy that has that type of outside, he end up being his 22-year-old season coming up. You can't miss with him. That's definitely somebody you need to be targeting in your drafts.
Yeah, as we kind of close things out here, for everybody out there kind of like searching, hopefully they come back here, listen to Stu with JT Brew with me and you for Toast Takes. But what are some of the websites that you utilize, some of the podcasts you listen to that kind of help you shape what you're going to do and give you great information for the upcoming season?
Yeah, I put a couple plugs here for some websites and podcasts that I actually highly believe in. Left Wing Lock is awesome. It's great for line combos. So they'll give you daily line combos, and you can determine again who's playing with McDavid, who's end up playing with Sid Crosby. Do they end up having an injury, and who's going to move up? Left Wing Lock's great for that. Cat Friendly is the best website by far, and it doesn't even compare to anything when you're actually playing in a salary cap league. All right, so you and I, JT, right? We have our house divided team. Cat Friendly is pretty much the site that I'm glued to. It even is great where you have these younger players signing what I call bridge deals, and they'll tell you, and it's so easy to read, whether or not you're going to end up having a guy who is an RFA or a UFA at the end of that bridge deal. RFAs mean, again, that those are guys you have an option to maybe drop if you don't like the deal they actually sign in real life. So nevertheless, Cat Friendly is great. Hockey Reference, I won't go into detail about this, but again, it's no difference in baseball reference, football, Pro Football Reference, whatever. You're going to see those stats from year to year. You can look at a player's career. Daily Faceoff, in my opinion, this is the best site to determine early in the day, because again, as you're streaming those positions and as you're using your 4 to 5 moves a week, the best position to stream in most formats, again, depends on your format, is goalies. So you want to know who's starting tonight. Well, a lot of times you can actually get a good feel, like, hey, this is a tandem starting a goalie situation here in a certain team. They go 50-50. The guy started the one night, he didn't do so well. Odds are the other guy's actually going. But if you don't know, dailyfaceoff.com is awesome for that. They'll tell you earliest in the day who's going to start, and you can actually go ahead and get on them and beat everybody else in the league to the punch. Dobber Hockey.
They're the kings. They're the kings.
Yeah. It's your article site. So I always joke, like, oh, back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, oh yeah, your parents, like, I had Playboy magazine and I use it for the articles, whatever. Article, it's great for articles. It's article write-ups. You got hockey writers actually writing articles that you actually read. But really, Dobber is they bring out monthly rankings for keeper leagues, for roto leagues, for dynasty leagues, for redraft leagues by position, and even your prospect top 50s and 100s or whatever. So when I'm actually getting into a draft that I don't know a whole lot about, especially as we get real deep into dynasty drafts, I rely on Dobber quite a bit. The podcasts that are great, that are historically awesome from year to year, Keeping Karlsson, they're amazing. I'm in their fantasy league as well. Stream Scheme, who's also it's a sub podcast off Keeping Karlsson as well, about streaming certain players based on their schedule as well. And again, Dobber Prospects. So those are just to name a couple, but if you're new to fantasy hockey, get plugged into some of those sites. They will definitely help you be competitive in your leagues.
Yeah, Toast, let everybody know where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm only on social media at Twitter, or now what we call X, so it's at Toast Clark.
Yep, hit them up with anything. You can find me at JT Orange, all that stuff. We'll bring this podcast to you every couple weeks. Super pumped about the first show. We got one out of the way here. Usually, you can find me on the stew with JT Brew throughout the week doing fantasy football, also doing fantasy college football gambling and pro football gambling. So check me out on those. But it was great to have you on for this edition, a special edition, Hockey Fantasy on the stew. Really appreciate it, Toast.
Yeah, and JT, real quick too, I'll put a plug in here. We're going to have to do a little bit of gambling discussion on here as well at some point for hockey.
Yeah, we'll bring some up throughout the season. Appreciate everybody coming out, checking us out. Make sure if you want to follow the stew with JT Brew, get on Spotify, all those, look us up, follow us. You'll know when stuff's coming your way. If you did get a chance to watch this, jump on Spotify or wherever you watch podcasts. Will be downloaded shortly, and you can listen to this. Tell all your friends. We appreciate it. May all your draft picks hit, and the trading never quits. See you next time. The stew, we're out.
You up on trades and why you move? You ain't designed to lose. Find you jumping over seemingly nothing, racking up points makes the game a little more fun to watch. Can drop release. We started with the mock draft and now we making a mockery of.